The dog barked incessantly toward the barn. Something was wrong. Upon opening the door, he didn't expect to find that. Blood, hay, and a secret hidden among the bales. Subscribe to the channel and discover how the tribe transformed fear into protection. The dawn was as dense as the watermelon in the yard, when only one sound cut through the silence in the Quilombola community of Serra da Formiga, Valente's persistent barking. It wasn't an ordinary alarm. It was an urgent call. Iracema, a dark-skinned woman with eyes that saw beyond the visible, had inherited the gift of listening from her ancestors. She lived in a mud house at the boundary between the forest and the community, where carnauba palm leaves covered the roof and the packed earth floor told stories of the feet that had walked there. Her caramel-colored dog, with alert ears and a muzzle marked by scars from old battles, didn't bark over trivial matters. When Valente darted toward the manioc storage, Iracema followed him without hesitation, quickly wrapping a cotton shawl around her shoulders, while her bare feet knew every stone along the path. The lantern swayed in her hand, projecting restless shadows on the mud walls. The smell of damp earth, after the rain that had fallen earlier that night, permeated the air like a premonition. Inside, the aroma of starch mixed with something more intense. Blood, fear, desperation. Among the flour sacks, an unconscious woman. Tattered clothes, scraped knees, her face covered with dried tears and dust from the journey. It was Raquel. Light skin, curly hair stuck to her damp forehead, and visibly on the run. She was there not by choice, but by absolute lack of options. Iracema didn't ask anything. She simply untied the scarf from her own head and covered the stranger's trembling shoulders. With the strength that years of working in the fields had given her, she carried the young woman in her arms to her house, laid her on the straw mat in the coolest corner, and offered what at that moment was the best remedy: respectful silence and fresh water. Iracema's hands, calloused by time and by the mortar and pestle, gently bathed the outsider's face, cleaning the fear imprinted on every centimeter of her skin. The kerosene lamp, the only witness to that encounter, projected, on the mud walls, the dance of two shadows that fate had united. With the first crow of the rooster, the matriarchs of the community arrived, not to ask questions but to offer care. They brought herbs harvested before the dew dried, clean fabric made on the community loom, and a broth of manioc with guinea fowl that restored even the most broken souls. Donna Zephyr, the oldest among them with hair as white as cotton and hands that knew the secret of every leaf in the caatinga, approached with slow steps. Her eyes, clouded by age but sharpened by wisdom, examined the young woman carefully. "This girl carries thorns in her soul," she murmured, while lighting a rosemary incense. "Thorns that are not hers." Raquel didn't speak, but her eyes were no longer as dull as the night before. They followed the movements of those women who, without asking questions, offered what she had forgotten existed: dignity. Days passed like the waters of the stream that cut through the community, constant, but never the same. Raquel began to recover not only her physical strength, but also fragments of the voice that had been silenced. It was one afternoon, while Iracema was braiding caroa fibers to make a new mat, that she finally spoke. "He will find me," she said in a voice as low as the buzzing of bees on the honeycomb. "He always finds me." There was no need to explain who he was. In isolated communities like Serra da Formiga, stories like Raquel's were not new. Her husband, Sergio, was a merchant in the nearby town, a man of possessions and influence, known as much for his public generosity as for his private cruelty. The marks on Raquel's back, which Iracema had treated with copaiba oil, told the story her mouth was afraid to pronounce. She had fled after the worst of beatings, when the promise of death no longer sounded like a threat, but like an imminent certainty. She had walked along the dirt road all night, guided only by survival instinct and vague rumors about a community in the middle of the forest where different people lived. The news arrived sooner than expected. Seu Toninho's son, who sold flour at the town market, returned with wide eyes and short breath. "There's a man offering money for information about a curly-haired woman who ran away from home. He's saying she's his wife and mentally ill." The information spread through the community like wildfire. The women gathered in Donna Zefa's yard, while the men formed a council under the centuries-old huazero tree. It wasn't just Raquel who was in danger. It was the refuge that Serra da Formiga represented for so many others who had found shelter there across generations. A decision needed to be made, and quickly. Meanwhile, in Iracema's house, Raquel trembled like a leaf in the wind. Valente, sensing her fear, lay down beside her, offering the warmth of his body as silent consolation. "I have nowhere to go," she finally confessed, tears streaming down the face that was beginning to regain some color. "If he finds me, this time there will be no turning back." Iracema, seated on an overturned mortar, was braiding a necklace of seeds with the concentration of someone weaving a destiny. "Those who arrive at Serra da Formiga don't do so by chance," she replied without taking her eyes off her work. "These lands have sheltered those who need shelter since the time of the first fugitives. The decision is not mine alone, but I can tell you one thing. As long as my dog recognizes you as a friend, my door will be open." That night, the entire community kept their eyes open. At the crossroads of the paths leading to the Quilombo, sentinels were positioned. Children were kept close to the houses, and in the center of the circle, under the flickering light of the fires, the Council of Elders made its decision. Serra da Formiga had resisted much more than a man with money in his pocket and hatred in his heart. It would resist again. In the depths of the night, when the silence seemed impenetrable, Valente suddenly raised his head. His ears caught what humans could not yet hear, the distant sound of engines tearing through the quietude of the forest. Danger was approaching, and with it the time for each one to show which side of history they were willing to stand on. The headlights cut through the darkness like sharp knives, illuminating the red dirt road that wound its way to Serra da Formiga. 3 pickup trucks advanced in formation, raising dust that mixed with the dawn mist. In the passenger seat of the first one, Sergio smoked impatiently, his face contorted in an expression that mixed anger and determination. "I'm sure those blacks are hiding my wife," he growled to the driver, a retired police officer who owed favors to the merchant, "and they're going to pay dearly for it." Meanwhile, in the center of the community, the sound of the sacred drum echoed. It wasn't a call for celebration, but an alert that everyone had known since childhood. Donna Zefa, leaning on her Jurema staff, commanded the preparations with the authority of someone who had faced worse storms. "Take the children to the stone shelter," she ordered firmly, "and bring the girl here." When Raquel arrived, supported by Iracema, her eyes reflected the fear of someone who knows violence up close. "He brought armed people," she whispered, recognizing the pattern of the approaching lights. "He's going to destroy everything because of me." The matriarch held the young woman's face between her wrinkled, dry hands like autumn leaves. "Child, nothing is destroyed in this land without the ancestors' permission, and they haven't given permission." With a gesture, she called Seu Benedito, the community healer, a man of few words and much knowledge, who carried on his chest medals of Catholic saints mixed with protection guides of the Orishas. "We need time," said Donna Zefa, "and time in this case will be our most precious ally." At the entrance to the community, the younger men positioned themselves strategically, hidden among the mandacaru bushes and the twisted trunks of umbuzero trees. They didn't carry weapons. Serra da Formiga was never a place of violence, but they knew every centimeter of that territory. They knew how to make an invader get lost on paths that were clear as water to them. The first pickup truck stopped before the improvised gate. Wooden trunks blocked the narrow passage. Sergio got out, kicking the dust with his alligator leather boots. The watch on his wrist, golden and ostentatious, reflected the light of the moon that now emerged between sparse clouds. "Open this shit," he shouted, drawing a gun from his waist. "I know my wife is in there." Seu Toninho emerged from the darkness like an apparition. An old fisherman who knew the tides of life, he walked slowly to the gate. "Good evening, sir," he said with the calmness of someone who is in no hurry. "How can I help you?" The response came in the form of threats and insults that cut through the air like whips. Sergio demanded the return of his property, offering money in exchange for Raquel. When negotiations proved fruitless, He ordered the men accompanying him to tear down the barrier. It was at this moment that Donna Zefa's plan went into action. The lights of the community went out simultaneously. Silence fell like a heavy cloak, interrupted only by the distant sound of drums. One by one, the community dogs, led by the imposing Valente, began to howl. Not just any howl, but the kind that sends shivers down the spine, that speaks directly to the primitive fear that every man carries within. In Irachima's now empty house, only carefully arranged objects remained. Raquel's clothes stretched over the bed, a bowl with leftover food, the lamp still lit. The perfect illusion of recent presence. Meanwhile, through underground tunnels dating back to the time of slavery, when those lands served as a refuge for fugitive blacks, Raquel was being led to a safe place. With her went the community's children, protected by women carrying kerosene lanterns and baskets with provisions. "Where are we going?" asked Raquel, feeling the humid, heavy air of the narrow tunnel. A girl of approximately 6 years old with braids decorated with colorful beads held her hand with surprising firmness. "To the womb of the earth," she replied with the simplicity of childhood. "It's where we hide when bad men come." Above them, chaos was ensuing. Frustrated with the apparent desertion of the community, Sergio ordered his men to ransack the houses. Doors were broken down, furniture smashed, pots and gourds thrown to the ground. The violence of the invaders contrasted with the almost total absence of resistance. The few residents they found limited themselves to observing in silence, as if watching a storm that, they knew, would soon pass. Only Seu Benedito remained, in the center of the yard, seated on a low stool, calmly lighting his clay pipe. When 2 men approached him, demanding information about Raquel, the healer blew smoke in perfect circles before responding. "The woman you're looking for is no longer here," he finally said. "She has gone where your hands cannot reach her." Sergio, upon hearing these words, advanced furiously on the old man. He grabbed him by the collar of his raw cotton shirt, lifting him violently. "Where is my wife, you old son of a bitch? Tell me before I finish you." Benedito showed no fear. His eyes, framed by deep wrinkles, fixed on those of the aggressor with disconcerting intensity. "Your wife? Interesting how you call something yours that you never truly possessed. Raquel is not property, young man. She is a river, and rivers cannot be imprisoned without drying up." The enigmatic response further enraged the merchant, who threw the old man to the ground. That's when he noticed something strange. Despite the chaos and destruction, there was no resistance. No one begged, no one cried. It was as if the entire community was just waiting. "Boss," called one of the henchmen, "I found something." In Irachima's house, they found clear evidence of Raquel's presence. A scarf he recognized as a gift he had given to his wife, recent marks on the straw mat, and even a half-full glass of water. "She was here," murmured Sergio, touching the objects, as if they could speak, "and she couldn't have gone far." That's when Valente appeared. The dog emerged in the doorway like a sentinel, teeth bared, fur bristling. He didn't bark, he just observed, calculating every movement. Sergio instinctively drew his weapon. "Get out of here, mutt." The dog didn't back down. On the contrary, he advanced one step, then another. There was something in his eyes, an almost human intelligence, an unshakable determination. For a second, fear ran down the spine of the armed man. He was interrupted by the shrill sound of police sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash in, the distance announcing the arrival of police cars. "Shit!" cursed one of the henchmen. "Someone called the police." In truth, no one had called. Serra da Formiga was too far away for any quick communication, and cell phones rarely got a signal in that region. What the invaders didn't know was that Seu Toninho, even before their arrival, had sent his eldest grandson on a motorcycle via the secondary road with a specific mission: to activate the alarm system installed at the entrance to the environmental reserve adjacent to the Quilombo. The system, designed to alert about possible illegal loggers, perfectly imitated the sound of police sirens, a simple but effective strategy. Sergio's men, many with criminal records, didn't want to risk a confrontation with authorities. "Let's go!" shouted the retired police officer. This is going to be trouble. Sergio hesitated. The possibility of finding Raquel was so close he could feel it, but the risk of being caught in the act, invading someone else's property and carrying weapons, was too great. "This isn't over," he shouted into the void as he retreated to the pickup truck. "I'll be back with a court order, and then let's see you hide her." When the engines roared, moving away along the dusty road, silence reigned again. One by one, the residents began to emerge from their hiding places. Donna Zefa was the first to return to the center of the community, where Seu Benedito was still, seated now with a trickle of blood running from the corner of his mouth. "Are they gone?" she asked, extending her hand to help her old friend stand up. "For now," he replied, accepting the support. "But they'll return. Men like him don't easily give up what they consider their property." Valente ran back to the tunnels, where Iracema waited with Raquel and the children. The dog barked 3 times, the agreed signal that it was safe to return. As they climbed up the stone stairs that led back to the surface, Raquel felt a small hand squeeze hers. It was the same girl as before, her eyes shining with wisdom beyond her years. "Don't be afraid," said the child. "The community is like a great tree. It may lose some leaves, but the roots are strong." Under the sky that was beginning to brighten, announcing a new day, the residents of Serra da Formiga gathered to assess the damage. There was much to rebuild, but nothing they couldn't do together, as they had always done across generations. What they didn't know was that time was running out. Sergio had left an ultimatum. He would return in 3 days, with the law on his side. And when that happened, not even all the unity of the community could protect Raquel from the fate her husband had planned for her. The day dawned heavy in Serra da Formiga. The marks of the invasion were everywhere, broken doors, scattered, belongings, the packed earth floor disturbed by strange boots. But there were also signs of resistance, hands already working together to rebuild, voices singing ancient songs of strength and persistence, gazes that met in silent determination. 3 days. That was the deadline they had before Sergio returned, this time supported by official papers and men of the law. "He has friends in the courthouse," Raquel explained during the meeting in the central yard. Her voice, once a whisper, now gained firmness as she was heard for the first time by the entire community. "He'll get a search and seizure order, maybe even declare me mentally incapable." The revelation provoked indignant murmurs. Raquel, who in the last few days had begun to help at the community school, demonstrated intelligence and sensitivity with the children. Nothing about her indicated any kind of instability, only the physical and emotional marks of someone who had lived under oppression for too long. "We need external help," suggested Joaquim, a teacher who came from the big city twice a week to teach mathematics and sciences. "I know a lawyer in Recife who works with human rights. Maybe she can advise on how to proceed legally." It was the cue for internal divisions to emerge. Some, like Seu Toninho, advocated seeking help from institutions. Others, represented by Donna Zefa's grave voice, preferred to trust in the ancestral methods that had always protected the community. "Papers didn't save us before," the elder reminded. "It was our unity and our knowledge of this land that guaranteed our survival for generations." While the debate heated up, Raquel remained silent, observing the movement of the children playing at a distance, apparently oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. Among them was Mariña, the girl with colorful braids who had held her hand in the tunnels. The child commanded an improvised circle dance, where other children spun and sang. Her eyes met Raquel's, and a smile lit up her small face, as if they shared a secret. It was at this moment that Iracema approached, bringing a bowl of fresh water. "They know more than we imagine," she commented, following Raquel's gaze. "Mariña lost her mother when she was only 4 years old. They say it was illness, but we all know it was sadness that took her, after her husband abandoned her to work in the sugarcane fields of the south." Raquel felt a knot in her throat. How does she manage to smile like that? Iracema took a sip of water before answering. "Because she learned early that pain is not the end of the story. It's just a chapter." The final decision came with the evening. They would follow both paths. Joaquim would leave immediately to contact the lawyer, while the community would prepare in its own way for the imminent confrontation. Raquel, for her part, made a personal decision that surprised everyone. "I will no longer hide," she announced, standing in the center of the circle. "If he comes, I will face him head-on, not as the woman who fled, but as someone who has chosen a new path." The murmur of approval was interrupted by Valente's alarmed barking. The dog, who rarely strayed from Raquel, was now running toward the entrance of the community, where a solitary figure had just arrived. Tension spread like wildfire until So Benedito's voice rose. "It's Jurassi." The name provoked sighs of relief. Jurassi was a son of the community who had left years ago to study law in the capital. His arrival, precisely at this critical moment, seemed like the work of destiny, or of the ancestors, as Donna Zefa whispered. Tall, with broad shoulders and curly hair tied back, he carried a worn backpack and eyes tired from the journey. "I received the message," he said simply, embracing his father, So Benedito. "I came as quickly as I could." As night fell, they gathered in the communal house to share the meal. And information. Jurassi listened attentively to Raquel's story, occasionally making notes in a worn notebook. His questions were precise, professional, but his eyes conveyed a compassion that went beyond legal duty. "Sergio Mendonça," he murmured, thoughtfully. "I know the name. Has businesses in various municipalities, financed political campaigns in the last elections. It won't be easy to face him in the legal field." The revelation weighed like lead on everyone's shoulders. "So what do we do?" asked Iracema, verbalizing the collective fear. Jurassi closed his notebook slowly. "We'll play on both boards," he replied, "on theirs with the laws they themselves created, and on ours with the strength our ancestors left us." 2 days remained now. Time, that relentless master, seemed to run faster than normal. The community divided itself between daily chores. The harvest couldn't wait. The children needed classes. The animals required care and preparations for the confrontation. Jurassi, for his part, alternated between calls to contacts in the capital and long conversations with the elders, seeking to build a strategy that united both worlds. In one of those afternoons, he found Raquel by the stream that cut through the community. She was washing clothes, rubbing them against the smooth stones with a force that spoke of contained anger. "May I ask you something personal?" he asked, sitting on the bank. She nodded without taking her eyes off the task. "Why did you stay with him for so long?" The question hung in the air like a dragonfly over water. Raquel finally stopped, observing the ripples her hands had created on the crystalline surface. "In the beginning, I thought it was love," she began, her voice low but firm. "He was kind, attentive. He brought gifts, made promises. When the shouting began, I thought it was temporary, that I had done something wrong that I could fix." She paused, wringing the wet shirt with unnecessary force. Then came the first slap. He cried, asked for forgiveness, swore it would never happen again. I believed him. I wanted to believe. Her hands finally stopped, resting tiredly on the fabric. When I realized I was trapped, I already had nowhere to go. My family had distanced themselves. His doing, I understood later. Friends disappeared. Money controlled to the last penny. And there was always the promise in the air, never spoken but always present, that if I tried to escape, he would find me. Jurassi listened in respectful silence. "What changed?" he finally asked. Raquel raised her eyes, now dry of tears she no longer had to shed. "I found an old photo. Me at 18 before I met him, smiling, alive. I didn't recognize myself, and I knew that if I stayed one more day, that girl in the photo would be dead forever." The silence that followed was interrupted by the arrival of Mariña, who carried a crown of wildflowers in her small hands. Without saying a word, she placed it on Raquel's head, drawing a surprised smile from the woman. "For you to look beautiful when he comes," explained the girl with the simple logic of childhood. "Then he'll see that you're no longer his." The unexpected wisdom left the adults speechless. That night, as the community gathered around the fire for the collective dinner, Jurassi shared his plan. He had managed, through contacts at the public defender's office, to obtain valuable information. Sergio had indeed obtained a court order claiming that his wife suffered from mental disorders and had been kidnapped by the Quilombola community. "He's coming tomorrow," he announced, causing a tense silence, "with the police and a doctor who I suspect is on his payroll." Before despair could set in, he raised his hand in a reassuring gesture. "But we have our counterattack prepared. I've secured a preventive protective measure for Raquel, based on photos of her injuries and the testimony she gave me. And more importantly, I've documented the collective property title of this land, recognized by the Palmares Foundation. They cannot enter here without express authorization from the community leaders." The plan was risky, depended on perfect timing and the timely arrival of reinforcements, including the lawyer Joaquim had contacted and a representative of the public ministry whom Gerasi knew from his college days. But it was the best they had. "And if it doesn't work?" someone asked from the darkness. It was Donna Zephyr who answered, her voice carrying the weight and strength of centuries of resistance. "Then we'll do as our ancestors did. We'll protect our own with nails, teeth, and the knowledge this land has given us." That night, while most slept a restless sleep, Raquel remained awake, sitting at the door of Iracema's house. Valente lay at her feet, alert despite his evident fatigue. In the distance, the sacred drum played a soft, almost imperceptible rhythm, not a call but a prayer. The sky dotted with stars seemed close enough to touch. "I'm afraid," she confessed to the dog, who raised his ears at the sound of her voice, "not of dying. I'm afraid that someone here will get hurt because of me." Valente rested his muzzle on her knee, eyes fixed on hers with an understanding that transcended the barrier between species. "You understand, don't you?" she smiled weakly, caressing the animal's ears. "You've also been wounded, but you chose to protect instead of attack." The dog closed his eyes under the caress, but his posture remained vigilant. Both knew that the real test was yet to come. The next morning, even before the sun had fully risen on the horizon, the community was already in motion. Children and the elderly were taken to the safety of the underground tunnels, this time not in flight, but as a strategic precaution. Valente and the other dogs were kept in the center of the community, ready to alert about the approach of strangers. Gerasi, formally dressed in the only dress shirt he had brought, reviewed the documents. Once more, his young face carried the seriousness of someone who knows they are about to enter an unequal battle. "Are we ready?" he asked Raquel, who appeared dressed in borrowed clothes, a long cotton skirt with a print and a simple white blouse. Her hair, now carefully braided by Iracema, framed a determined face. "No," she answered honestly, "but I'll face him anyway." Beside her, Iracema nodded in silence. Her face, marked by time and sun, exhibited the same tranquil resolution of someone who has seen many storms pass. "He comes to fetch a broken woman," she finally said. "He will find a fortress." The sound of engines in the distance announced that the hour had come. As expected, it was a considerable entourage: 2 police cars, Sergio's private car, an imposing pickup truck, and a smaller vehicle that probably belonged to the doctor. Dust rose on the path, like a cloud that precedes the storm. At the entrance to the community, a group positioned itself, not in combat formation, but as dignified hosts. Gerasi at the front with documents in hand, Seu Benedito and Donna Zephyr representing the elders, and one step behind, Raquel and Iracema, side by side. What none of the visitors could see was the rest of the community, strategically positioned at key points. They didn't carry weapons. Serra da Formiga was never a place of violence, but they were prepared to protect their own if men's law failed to do justice. The tension in the air was as palpable as the humidity before rain. When the vehicle stopped and the doors opened, Valente stepped forward, placing himself before Raquel. He didn't growl, didn't show his teeth. He just observed, a silent sentinel ready for whatever might come. The confrontation, now inevitable, was about to reveal which side justice would truly favor. Sergio was the first to descend from the vehicle, adjusting his expensive suit as if preparing for a business meeting. His eyes, cold as river stones, swept over the group awaiting him until they found Raquel. For an instant, a flash of surprise crossed his face. He expected to find his wife hiding, cowering, not standing and resolute. "Raquel, darling," he said in a honeyed voice, advancing a few steps. "Good to see you're well. I've come to take you home." Valente emitted a low growl, almost imperceptible. Raquel placed her hand on the animal's head, a gesture of both restraint and gratitude. "I no longer have a home with you, Sergio," she replied, her voice clear in the tense silence of the morning. "And you know that." The false cordiality on the man's face gave way to a harder expression. With a gesture, he called the others, a middle-aged delegate with a bored air, 2 young police officers visibly uncomfortable, and a man in a white coat carrying a medical case. "I have a court order," he announced, extending a paper that Jurasi immediately took. "My wife is mentally incapacitated and was brought here against her will. I've come to take her back for proper treatment." Jurasi examined the document with professional attention before responding. "This order was obtained based on false information, Mr. Mendonça," he declared, his voice young but firm. "I have here a protective measure in favor of Mrs. Raquel, based on evidence of continued domestic violence." He handed his own documents to the delegate, who examined them with a raised eyebrow. While the legal impasse unfolded, Sergio took another step toward Raquel. Immediately, Valente placed himself between them, this time with his teeth bared. "Control that mutt," ordered Sergio, instinctively backing away. It was Irashima who responded, her voice carrying the quiet wisdom of matriarchs. "Valente only growls at those who represent danger. Interesting that he never did that with Raquel, isn't it?" The seemingly simple comment carried a powerful accusation, which did not go unnoticed by the delegate. His eyes moved from the dog to Sergio and then to Raquel, noticing for the first time the semi-hidden scars on her arms. The doctor, who until then had remained in the background, stepped forward with the authority of someone who is accustomed to not being questioned. "As a professional, I can attest that this woman needs psychiatric care," he declared, opening his case. "I've brought sedatives to ensure her safe transport." That's when Donna Zephyr stepped forward, her small but erect body like a Jurema trunk. "Doctor," she called, her eyes staring at him with disconcerting intensity. "Your oath is to heal, isn't it? Look carefully at this woman. Where are the signs of madness that your report mentions?" Disconcerted, the doctor stammered some response about previous evaluations and erratic behavior. Jurasi seized the opportunity. "Doctor, would you be willing to submit your report to an independent medical board? I have here the contact of the Ethics Committee of the Regional Medical Council, which would certainly be interested in analyzing the case." The veiled threat had its effect. The doctor backed away, suddenly less sure of his position. Sergio, realizing he was losing ground, changed tactics. "Raquel," he called, his voice now choked with manufactured emotion. "Look what these people are doing to us. They're separating us. You know I love you, that everything I did was for your own good. Let's go home, start over." For the first time since the beginning of the confrontation, Raquel seemed to falter. Years of psychological manipulation don't unravel in a few days. And Sergio's words touched deep wounds, not completely healed. It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Mariña escaped the vigilance of the adults in the tunnels and ran to the center of the scene. Without hesitation, she positioned herself beside Raquel and took her hand. The gesture, so simple and at the same time so powerful, snatched Raquel from the trance into which Sergio's words had plunged her. She looked at the girl, at her colorful braids and her determined face, and something strengthened within her. "No, Sergio," she finally answered. "Love doesn't leave marks like the ones you left on me. Love doesn't imprison, doesn't diminish, doesn't hurt. What you feel is not love, it's possession." The firmness in her voice surprised everyone, including herself. Sergio, unmasked, dropped the facade of the concerned husband, his face contorted into an expression of pure hatred. "You ungrateful bitch," he vociferated, advancing with his fist raised. "After all I've done for you." The movement was so quick it caught everyone by surprise. Before anyone could react, Valente leaped, intercepting Sergio's advance. He didn't attack. He just placed himself as a living barrier, unwavering. The impact made Sergio stumble backward, falling seated on the red earth, his expensive suit now stained with dust. The delegate, who had been observing the scene with growing discomfort, finally took a position. "Mr. Mendonça, I'm going to have to ask you to contain yourself," he said, his voice assuming an official tone. "I just witnessed an attempted assault that directly contradicts your allegations." At that exact moment, two cars appeared on the road, an official one with the insignia of the public ministry and a private one from which descended a middle-aged woman with an executive folder, the human rights lawyer whom Joaquim had contacted. The reinforcement had arrived at the exact moment. Cornered, Sergio tried one last card. "This land shouldn't even exist," he shouted, accusingly pointing to the simple houses of the community, a bunch of invaders who call themselves quilombolas to steal productive lands. Seu Benedito, who until then had maintained a dignified silence, finally spoke. His voice, deep and measured, carried the weight of generations. "These lands were watered with the blood of our ancestors, long before your family appeared, Mr. Mendonça. We have a title recognized by the Brazilian state, and our existence does not depend on your approval." The arrival of the new interveners completely changed the dynamics of the confrontation. The representative of the public ministry, a woman with indigenous features and a shrewd look, quickly checked the documents presented by both parties. "This court order," she announced, raising the paper brought by Sergio, "was obtained through false information and irregular procedures. It is automatically suspended pending further analysis." She then turned to Raquel, her tone softening. "Ma'am, is it your wish to remain in this community of your own free will?" The answer came without hesitation. "Yes." "And do you feel threatened by your husband?" "Ex-husband," Raquel corrected, straightening her shoulders. "And yes, I fear for my life if I am forced to return." It was enough. With a gesture, the prosecutor indicated to the police officers, "Ensure the safety of the lady and this community. Mr. Mendonça must withdraw immediately and respect the minimum distance of 500 meters according to the protective measure." Sergio, seeing his plan crumble, exploded in threats. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I have powerful friends. I'll sue each one of you. This land will become pasture for my cattle, and as for you," he pointed to Raquel, "you'll still beg me to come back." The prosecutor observed him with the calmness of someone who has faced worse intimidations. "Your threats have just been registered by all present, including law enforcement agents," she replied. "I suggest you withdraw before your situation worsens even further." Defeated, but still furious, Sergio was escorted back to his vehicle. The doctor, visibly embarrassed, mumbled incomprehensible apologies as he quickly moved away. When the pickup trucks finally left the community, an explosion of relief swept through the group. Children began to emerge from hiding places, adults embraced each other, and even the most skeptical allowed themselves cautious smiles. The battle was won, at least this one. In the weeks that followed, Serra da Formiga experienced a transformation. Raquel's story, far from being an isolated case, proved to be a catalyst for deeper changes. Other women from the region, inspired by her courage, began to seek help against situations of abuse. The human rights lawyer, impressed with the organization and resistance of the community, offered permanent legal services. Girazzi, reconnected with his roots, decided to postpone his return to the capital to help structure a support center for victims of violence within the Quilombo itself. Mariinha, with the natural wisdom of children, became inseparable from Raquel. The girl who had lost her mother and the woman who had never had children found in each other what they lacked, without the need for names or definitions for the bond that united them. On a particularly hot afternoon, while Raquel was teaching Mariinha to braid caroa fibers, as Iracema had taught her, Valente appeared running, barking toward the road. Everyone's heart accelerated for a moment. Could it be Sergio, breaking the court order? But what they saw was an official jeep from the Palmares Cultural Foundation, bringing important news. The territory of Serra da Formiga had finally been fully approved, after years of bureaucratic waiting. The coincidence was too great to be just the work of chance. The visibility that the case had brought had accelerated processes that had dragged on for decades. "This is how justice works sometimes," explained Jurati during the celebration that followed. "It needs to be pushed, reminded, provoked to do what is right." Under the starry sky that night, while drums echoed and voices united in ancestral songs, Raquel observed the dance of the flames in the fire. Iracema sat beside her, offering a bowl of gengibira, a traditional community drink. "Do you still think of leaving?" asked the older woman. Raquel shook her head slowly. "This place gave me more than shelter," she replied, watching Mariña, who was dancing with other children around the fire. "It gave me a purpose." Iracema's smile was like a dawn, slow, gradual, but full of promise. "I knew it would be like this since Valente found you," she confessed. "That dog is never wrong about who belongs to this place." As if understanding they were talking about him, Valente raised his head from his vigilance post at Raquel's feet. His eyes, reflecting the flames, seemed to contain an ancestral wisdom. "There are wounds that never completely disappear," continued Iracema, her fingers unconsciously tracing her own scars, marks of a life of work and resistance. "But they can transform into something different, not into weakness, but into strength." That night, as the community celebrated not just the legal victory, but the incorporation of a new member into its web of relationships, something subtle and profound was consolidated. Serra da Formiga, like so many other traditional communities scattered throughout Brazil, was not just a place on the map. It was a living concept of belonging, a social fabric braided with threads of memory, resistance, and welcome. Months later, when the first November rains transformed the red earth into fertile beds, Raquel planted her first field. Her hands, previously accustomed only to domestic work under constant surveillance, now knew the pleasure of sowing, of creating, of belonging. Mariña accompanied her, learning and teaching simultaneously, as is proper to true relationships. Sergio's name was rarely mentioned, not out of fear or taboo, but because his relevance diminished with each passing day. As Dona Zefa used to say, "There are people who are like storms in our lives, violent, frightening, but passing. What matters is what we build after they leave." On a particularly significant afternoon, Raquel finally accepted the invitation to participate in the initiation ritual as a full member of the community. Dressed in white clothes, her bare feet touching the earth she now considered her own, she entered the circle formed by the residents. One by one, the elders approached, offering symbols of welcome, seeds for prosperity, water for purification, embers for inner strength. When it was Iracema's turn, the woman who had first welcomed her brought something unexpected, a puppy, son of Valente, with a dog from the neighborhood. "So that you never walk alone," she explained, placing the small animal in her arms. "And to remember that, just as Valente found you when you needed it most, there is always something or someone guiding us to where we should be." Raquel received the gift with silent tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. The puppy, still, clumsy and sleepy, nestled against her chest as if recognizing a home. At her side, Mariña watched with bright eyes, already planning names and games. And so, under the open sky of Serra da Formiga, between the singing of birds and the whisper of Juazeiro leaves, a new story was established, not as a substitute for the previous one, with its pains and scars, but as a continuation. Because there are wounds that time does not erase, but that respect, welcome, and belonging transform into marks of honor, testimonies not only of what was endured, but mainly of what was overcome. And when night fell, serene and starry, Valente took his usual post at the door of the house that Raquel could now truly call her own. Not out of protective instinct, but by choice. Because there are bonds that transcend explanations, that speak directly to what is most essential in all of us, the capacity to recognize in the other, be it human or animal, the reflection of one's own dignity. If you were moved by this journey of courage and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the soul and remind us of the power of resistance and welcome. Leave your like, share with those who need to hear that there is always a possible new beginning, and comment on which part touched your heart the most. Just as Valente found Raquel at the right moment, your presence here is not a coincidence. It's